The massive doors of the Galactic Defense Academy slid open with a soft hiss. Sarah Chun stepped through, carrying her single duffel bag over her shoulder. The entrance hall stretched out before her like a cathedral made of metal and light. Alien cadets moved in groups, their voices creating a strange music of clicks, growls, and musical tones she had never heard before. Sarah had studied the major species during her journey here, but seeing them in person was different. The Krathari stood nearly 8 feet tall, their thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. They moved slowly but with purpose, like walking tanks. Their deep voices rumbled when they spoke to each other. The Vextai were the opposite. These reptilian beings were tall and thin, with quick movements that reminded Sarah of hunting cats. Their large yellow eyes missed nothing as they scanned the room. They spoke in sharp, clipped sounds that sounded almost like machine code. Then there were the Zephyrians. These blue-skinned humanoids had large heads that housed their famous brains. They were known across the galaxy for their intelligence and their ability to solve complex problems. They moved in small groups, always talking quietly among themselves about things Sarah could not understand. All of these aliens were impressive in their own ways. Sarah felt very small among them. A floating device approached her. It looked like a metal ball with lights dancing across its surface. When it spoke, its voice was calm and neutral. "Cadet Sarah Chun from Earth, please follow the blue line to Processing Station 7. A line of blue light appeared on the floor in front of her. Sarah followed it through the hall, aware that many eyes were watching her. She heard whispers in different languages, but she caught a few words in Galactic Standard. Human. Deathworld. So small. Sarah kept walking. She had expected this. Humans had only been discovered by the galactic community 20 years ago. She was the first of her species to be accepted into the Defense Academy. The weight of representing all of humanity pressed down on her shoulders. Processing Station 7 was a small room with white walls and bright lights. A Zephyrian sat behind the desk, his large black eyes scanning a holographic display. He looked up when Sarah entered. "Cadet Chun, I am Administrator Keth Volume. Please place your hand on the scanner." Sarah placed her hand on a glowing pad. Lights moved beneath her palm as the machine read her biological data. "Interesting," Keth Volume said, studying the readout. "Your bone density is quite high for your body mass, and these muscle fiber readings are unusual. Is there a problem?" Sarah asked. "No problem. Just unexpected data. The computer systems have classified Earth as a Class 12 death world, but we rarely see inhabitants from such places." He handed her a small device. "This is your room assignment and class schedule. Orientation begins at 08:00 tomorrow." Sarah took the device and looked at the screen. "Room 1247C, Combat Training Track. Advanced Tactical Studies." "Thank you, Administrator." As she left the processing station, Sarah noticed more aliens staring at her. She overheard a conversation between 2 Krathari cadets. "A human in the combat track? That seems wrong. Earth is listed as dangerous, but look at her. She barely reaches my chest. Maybe the classification system made an error." Sarah found her room on the 12th level of the dormitory complex. The space was small but comfortable, with a bed, desk, and personal storage unit. The window looked out over the Academy's training fields, where she could see groups of cadets practicing various exercises. Her roommate was already there. The being introduced herself as Yixta, a member of the insectoid Hyvini species. Yixta had 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like jewels. "You are the human everyone talks about," Yixta said in perfect galactic standard. "I have heard many stories about your people." "What kind of stories?" Sarah asked as she unpacked her few belongings. "Strange ones. They say humans come from a world where everything tries to kill you. But you seem very peaceful." Sarah smiled. My planet can be dangerous, but we have learned to adapt. The others wonder if you will be able to keep up with the training. The combat track is very difficult. I will do my best." That evening, Sarah went to the dining hall for dinner. The room was enormous, filled with hundreds of tables. Each species seemed to group together, creating islands of similar beings scattered across the space. Sarah got her meal from the human-compatible food dispenser and looked for a place to sit. Most tables were full, and she did not want to intrude on established groups. She found an empty table near the wall and sat alone. The food was bland but nutritious. As she ate, she watched the other cadets. They seemed confident and comfortable with each other. Many had probably grown up hearing stories about the famous Defense Academy. For them, being here was the fulfillment of a dream they had always expected to achieve. For Sarah, it was different. 20 years ago, humans did not even know other intelligent life existed. Now she sat in a room with beings from dozens of worlds, preparing to learn how to defend the galaxy. A group of HFY cadets at a nearby table kept looking in her direction and whispering. Sarah caught fragments of their conversation. "Deathworld classification must be wrong. Look how small she is." Probably a clerical error in the files. Sarah finished her meal and returned to her room. She spent the evening reviewing her course materials and preparing for the next day. The academic subjects looked challenging but manageable. The combat training would be more difficult. She had trained in martial arts on Earth, but she had no idea what techniques the other species might use. Before going to sleep, Sarah stood at her window and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth, a small blue world that most of the galaxy considered too dangerous to visit. Her people had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. They had learned to be tough because their world demanded it. Tomorrow, she would begin proving that humans belonged here. She would show these aliens that size and strength were not the only measures of a warrior. Her people had other gifts, forged in the harsh fires of a world that never showed mercy. Sarah Chun closed her eyes and prepared for the challenge ahead. The first week at the Galactic Defense Academy passed quickly for Sarah. Her academic classes were challenging but manageable. Galactic history, xenobiology, and strategic planning all required hours of study each night. But she was keeping up with her classmates. The real test came with combat training. Instructor Valanth was a Centaurian, a species known for their military discipline. His gray skin was covered with scars from many battles, and his 4 eyes never missed anything that happened in this training hall. He had been teaching at the academy for 30 years. "Combat is not about size or strength alone," he announced to the class on the first day. "It is about understanding your opponent, using your environment, and applying force at the right moment." The training hall was enormous, with different areas for different types of combat practice. There were wrestling mats, weapon racks, obstacle courses, and simulation chambers. Sarah looked around at her classmates and felt her stomach tighten with nervousness. The other cadets in combat track were impressive. There were 12 Krathari, their thick armor-like skin making them look like living fortresses. 8 HFY moved with the fluid grace of natural hunters. 6 Zephyrians stood together, probably calculating the physics of every movement before they made it. And then there was Sarah, the only human in the class. The largest of the HFY cadets was named Shelter. He stood over 7 feet tall, with scales that shifted from dark green to black depending on the light. His yellow eyes were cold and calculating, and his mouth was full of sharp teeth that he showed when he smiled. He came from Krex Prime, a world famous for producing warriors. On the second day of training, Shelter approached Sarah during a break between exercises. "So you are the Deathworld girl," he said, looking down at her with amusement. "I have heard much about humans. What have you heard?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice calm. "That your people are weak and primitive. that you come from a backward world where you fight with metal sticks and throw rocks at each other." Several other cadets gathered around to listen. Sarah noticed that none of them disagreed with Shalter's words. "Earth may be different from your world," Sarah said, "but we are not weak." Shalter laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Look at you. You barely reach my chest. Your skin is soft and pink. You have no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced muscles. What could you possibly contribute to galactic defense?" "Maybe we should find out," Sarah replied. "Oh, we will," Shalter said with a sharp smile. "I am very curious to see what a Deathworld girl can do against real warriors." As the days passed, Shalter's comments became more frequent and more public. During weapon training, he loudly wondered how humans had ever survived on their dangerous world if they were so fragile. During tactics class, he questioned whether Sarah could even carry military equipment with her small frame. "On Crex Prime," he announced one afternoon, "we learn to hunt before we can walk properly. Our children face creatures that would terrify adult humans. We are born for war." The other cadets began to join in with their own stories. A Crutheri named Gorthik talked about the gravity training he had endured since childhood. A Zephyrian called Nelvian discussed the mental combat simulations that had shaped his strategic thinking. Sarah listened to all of this without responding. She watched how each species moved, how they fought, what their strengths and weaknesses were. The Crutheri were strong but slow. The Vextai were fast but relied too much on their natural weapons. The Zephyrians were smart but physically weak. Instructor Valanth observed these interactions but did not intervene. Sarah wondered if this was part of the training, to see how cadets handled social pressure and conflict. During the third week, the class began hand-to-hand combat training. This was what Sarah had been both dreading and anticipating. All her life, she had trained in martial arts. She had studied karate, jiu-jitsu, and boxing, but she had never fought against aliens before. Valanth paired cadets together for sparring matches. Sarah watched as the others demonstrated their techniques. The Crutheri used their weight and armor to overwhelm opponents. The Vextai relied on speed and their claws. The Zephyrians used precise, calculated movements based on scientific analysis. When it came time for Sarah's first match, she was paired with a smaller Zephyrian. The fight was awkward but educational. The aliens' movements were predictable because they followed logical patterns. Sarah was able to use this against him, but it took longer than she wanted. Shalter watched from the sidelines, making comments to his friends. "Look how slow she is. A real warrior would have finished that fight in seconds. Her technique is sloppy. She moves like someone who learned from books instead of real combat. I could defeat her with one hand tied behind my back." After Sarah's victory, Shalter approached her again. "That was entertaining," he said, "but you were fighting a Zephyrian. They are not known for physical combat. Wait until you face a real warrior. Like you?" Sarah asked, "Exactly like me." Shalter's smile showed all his sharp teeth. "I come from a family of legendary fighters. My ancestors have been warriors for 1,000 generations. My reflexes are 3 times faster than any human. My strength is 5 times greater. My combat experience spans years of real battle training." Sarah nodded. "That sounds impressive." "It is more than impressive. It is the difference between a predator and prey." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that others could still hear. "On my world, we have a saying. The smaller the prey, the easier the hunt." The other cadets laughed nervously. Sarah could see that some of them were uncomfortable with Shalter's behavior, but none wanted to challenge him directly. "Perhaps we will have a chance to spar soon," Sarah said. "Oh, we will. I will make sure of it." Shalter straightened to his full height. I want everyone to see what happens when a soft little Deathworld girl tries to fight a real warrior." That evening, Sarah returned to her room and practiced her forms. She moved through the basic techniques she had learned years ago, feeling the familiar patterns flow through her muscles. Her roommate Yixta watched with interest. "The Vuxtai cadet is very confident," Yixta observed. "Yes, he is. Are you worried about fighting him?" Sarah paused in her practice. "On Earth, we have a saying too. Empty vessels make the most noise." "What does that mean?" Sarah smiled. "It means that those who talk the most about their abilities are often the ones who have the least to back up their words. But he is much larger than you, and his species is known for combat." "Size is not everything," Sarah said, returning to her practice. "My instructors on Earth taught me that the biggest opponent often has the biggest weaknesses." The next morning brought advanced combat training. Instructor Valanth announced that they would be doing demonstration matches, where cadets would show different fighting techniques to the class. Shalter immediately raised his hand. "Instructor, I volunteer to demonstrate proper combat technique. I think it would be educational for everyone to see how a trained warrior handles an opponent." His yellow eyes fixed on Sarah. Perhaps the human would be willing to help with the demonstration. "Valanth." Four Eyes studied both cadets. "Very well. Shalter and Chun, prepare for demonstration combat." Sarah felt her heart begin to beat faster. Around the training hall, cadets stopped their own exercises to watch. Word spread quickly that the Deathworld human was about to face the Vuxtai warrior. This was the moment she had been preparing for all her life. The training hall fell silent as word spread through the academy. The Deathworld human was about to fight Shalter, the pride of Krex Prime. Cadets from other classes began to gather at the viewing windows that looked down into the combat arena. Even some instructors appeared, curious to see this unusual match. Sarah stood at one end of the circular fighting area, checking her uniform and stretching her muscles. The arena floor was made of a soft material that would cushion falls, but still allow for proper footing. Bright lights overhead eliminated all shadows, ensuring that both fighters would have perfect visibility. At the other end, Shalter was putting on a show for the growing crowd. He flexed his massive arms, showing off muscles that rippled beneath his scaled skin. He practiced a few quick strikes, his claws cutting through the air with audible swooshes. Each movement was designed to intimidate and impress. "Look at those reflexes," one cadet whispered to another. "He's like lightning." "The human does not stand a chance," replied a Krathari. "This will be over in seconds." Instructor Valanth stepped into the center of the arena. His four eyes scanned both fighters, then looked up at the crowd that had gathered. "This is a demonstration match," he announced in his deep voice. "The purpose is educational. Both cadets will show their techniques, but this is not a real combat situation. Safety protocols are in effect." He looked directly at Shalter. "Remember that this is your classmate, not your enemy." Shalter nodded, but his smile remained predatory. "Of course, instructor. I will be very careful with the little human." Sarah said nothing. She had learned long ago that words before a fight were usually wasted energy. Instead, she observed her opponent, noting how he moved, where he placed his weight, how he held his arms. "Fighters, take your positions," Valanth commanded. Sarah and Shalter moved to opposite sides of a white circle painted on the arena floor. The crowd above grew larger and more excited. Sarah could hear bets being placed in various alien languages. "Before we begin," Shalter announced loudly, "I want everyone to understand what they are about to see. This is not a fair fight. I am a trained warrior from a species that has mastered combat for millennia." "She is." He looked at Sarah with mock concern. "Well, she is very brave for trying." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah noticed that not everyone was laughing, but those who remained silent did not speak up in her defense. "I will try to end this quickly," Shelter continued. "I do not want to hurt the Deathworld girl. Her people have suffered enough just by living on their dangerous little planet." More laughter. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she kept her expression calm. Her instructors on Earth had taught her that anger was a luxury a fighter could not afford. However, Shelter raised his voice. "This will serve as a good lesson for everyone. This is what happens when inferior species try to compete with their betters. Watch carefully and learn." Instructor Valant raised his hand. "Fighters ready?" Shelter dropped into a combat stance that looked impressive, but seemed designed more for show than effectiveness. He held his clawed hands high, his long arms spread wide. His feet were planted firmly, and his body was coiled like a spring ready to unleash devastating power. Sarah took a much simpler stance. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, her hands raised but not clenched. She looked relaxed, almost casual. To the watching crowd, she appeared completely unprepared for what was coming. "The human looks scared," someone whispered. "She is probably frozen with fear," another voice replied. "This is cruel. The Vextai should not be allowed to fight someone so much smaller." Shelter heard these comments, and his grin grew wider. "Do not worry, everyone. I will make this educational, but not brutal. I will show proper technique while being merciful to my inferior opponent." He looked directly at Sarah. "Are you ready, little human? I promise this will not hurt much." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I am ready when you are. Begin." Valant shouted. For a moment, both fighters remained still. Shelter was clearly savoring the moment, drawing out the anticipation. The crowd held its breath. Then Shelter moved, but not with the lightning speed he had demonstrated during warm-up. Instead, he approached Sarah slowly, almost lazily. His movements were exaggerated and theatrical. "As you can see," he announced to the crowd while walking towards Sarah, "the proper approach is to use your superior reach and strength to control the distance. A smaller opponent cannot hurt you if you do not let them get close." He was treating the fight like a lecture, using Sarah as a prop to demonstrate his superiority. The crowd seemed to be enjoying the show. "The key is patience," Shelter continued, still moving slowly towards Sarah. "Let your opponent make mistakes. Force them to come to you, where you can use your advantages." Sarah remained in her ready position, watching and waiting. She did not move forward or backward. Her breathing was slow and controlled. "Notice how the human stands there helplessly," Shelter said. "She knows she cannot win, so she hopes I will make an error. But I am too experienced for such amateur tactics." He was now within arm's reach of Sarah. His long arms could easily touch her. But he was still moving with theatrical slowness. "Now, I will demonstrate the proper way to end a fight quickly and efficiently," he announced. "Watch how I use my natural advantages to..." Shelter reached out with one massive hand, intending to simply push Sarah backward and off balance. It was a contemptuous gesture, meant to show how easily he could control the fight. He was not even trying to hurt her, just to embarrass her in front of everyone. His movement was casual, almost gentle. After all, this was just a demonstration against an obviously inferior opponent. There was no need for real violence against such a small, helpless creature. The hand reached towards Sarah's shoulder, fingers spread wide. Shelter's expression was one of bored superiority, like an adult dealing with a troublesome child. In the crowd above, cadets leaned forward to get a better view. They expected to see the human stumble and fall, maybe cry a little. Some felt sorry for her. Others thought this whole demonstration was unnecessary. What happened next changed everything. Sarah moved, but she did not move the way anyone expected. She did not try to block Shelter's hand or step backward to avoid it. Instead, she flowed like water, like mercury, like something that could not be grasped or stopped. The hand that was reaching for her shoulder suddenly found nothing but air. Sarah had slipped to the side, but somehow she was now closer to Shelter instead of farther away. Shelter's confident expression changed to confusion. Where had she gone? How was she suddenly inside his guard? He tried to adjust, to turn and face her new position, but his body was still moving forward from his original push. His balance was wrong. His weight was in the wrong place. And Sarah was no longer the helpless victim he had expected. The crowd above fell completely silent. In 3 seconds, everything they thought they knew about humans was about to change forever. Sarah's movement was unlike anything the watching aliens had ever seen. Where they expected rigid strength or desperate scrambling, they saw something that seemed to flow like liquid. Shelter's massive hand, reaching out to push her aside like a piece of furniture, suddenly grasped empty air. Sarah had not moved away from him. She had moved through the space he controlled, slipping past his guard like smoke through fingers. In the first second, she redirected his forward momentum. Shelter had been leaning into his casual push, expecting to meet resistance. Instead, Sarah guided his hand past her, using his own force against him. The vexed High Warrior found himself overextended. His balance shifted forward in a way that felt completely wrong. "What?" Shelter began to say, but the word died in his throat. In the second, Sarah moved inside his reach. This was not a place where Shelter expected an opponent to be. His fighting style, like most of his species, relied on using his long arms and claws to keep enemies at a distance. No one was supposed to be this close to his body. Sarah's elbow found the nerve cluster beneath Shelter's shoulder, a spot where the vexed eye anatomy placed a critical junction of muscle and nerve. She struck with surgical precision, using not brute force, but exact placement and timing. Shelter's right arm went numb instantly. The limb that had been reaching for Sarah now hung useless at his side. His yellow eyes went wide with shock and confusion. In all his years of training, no opponent had ever found that pressure point so quickly or struck it so accurately. In the 3rd second, Sarah completed what she had started. She pivoted on her left foot, using the movement to add power to her next action. Her right leg swept behind Shelter's legs, but this was not a simple trip. She had calculated his center of gravity, his momentum, and the angle of his fall before she even began the move. At the same time, her hands found his belt and jacket. But instead of trying to lift or throw his massive weight, she used leverage and timing. She guided his fall, controlling it, making his own body weight work against him. Shelter crashed to the arena floor with a sound like thunder. The impact echoed through the training hall and up into the viewing areas where hundreds of alien cadets watched in stunned silence. The 7-foot, vexed eye warrior lay on his back, staring up at the ceiling lights. His right arm was still numb. His legs were tangled beneath him. His mouth was open in complete shock. Sarah stood beside him, not even breathing heavily. She had not used excessive force or tried to hurt him seriously. The entire exchange had been about technique, timing, and understanding how bodies moved in space. She extended her hand toward Shelter. "Are you all right?" For a moment, Shelter just stared at her offered hand. Then he looked around at the crowd of watching cadets. Every eye in the academy seemed to be focused on him, lying helpless on the floor while a small human offered to help him up. The silence stretched on. No one seemed to know what to say or do. Finally, Shelter reached up with his left hand and grasped Sarah's. She helped pull him to his feet, supporting his weight as he regained his balance. "How?" he whispered, his voice so quiet that only Sarah could hear. "Training," she replied simply. Shelter looked down at his right arm, flexing his fingers. Feeling was starting to return, but slowly. "What did you do to my arm?" "Pressure point. The feeling will come back in a few minutes." I have never. No one has ever. Shelter struggled to find words. That nerve cluster is supposed to be protected by our shoulder plating. Sarah nodded. I noticed the gap in the armor during our first week of training. Every species has vulnerable spots if you know where to look. Above them, the crowd began to murmur. Voices in a dozen languages tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Did she just defeat Shelter? That is impossible. He's one of the best fighters in our year. How did something so small move so fast? What kind of training do humans receive? Instructor Valanth stepped forward, his four eyes studying both cadets carefully. Cadet Chun, explain your technique. Sarah straightened to attention. The opponent was overconfident and telegraphed his intentions, sir. He moved slowly because he did not consider me a real threat. I used his momentum against him and targeted a vulnerable point that his species' armor does not fully protect. And how did you know about Vextai anatomy? I studied all the species in our class during the first week, sir. I observed their movements, their fighting styles, and their physical characteristics. Valanth nodded slowly. Cadet Shelter, do you have anything to add? Shelter was still testing his right arm. Moving it carefully, a sensation returned. He looked at Sarah with an expression that was completely different from his earlier arrogance. She moved like nothing I've ever fought before, he said. My instructors on Krex Prime taught me to fight against other Vextai, against Krathari, against most known species. But humans move differently. How so? Shelter searched for the right words. We rely on unnatural weapons, claws, teeth, armor, size. We fight in ways that use these advantages. But she fought like someone who has no natural weapons at all. Explain. She used everything, my weight, my momentum, my expectations, even my armor against me. She turned my strengths into weaknesses. He looked at Sarah again. On Krex Prime, we have a saying, the strong survive, but humans seem to follow a different rule. What rule is that? Sarah answered quietly. The adaptable survive. In the viewing areas above, the crowd had grown larger. Word was spreading throughout the academy about what had happened. Cadets who had missed the fight were demanding to know how a human had defeated one of the most feared warriors in their year. The Krathuri cadets were talking among themselves in their deep, rumbling voices. The Zephyrians were already pulling up data files about human physiology and combat techniques. The other Vextai looked confused and concerned. Instructor Valanth raised his hand for silence. This demonstration shows us several important lessons. First, never underestimate an opponent based on their appearance. Second, technique can overcome raw strength when properly applied. Third, knowledge of your opponent's capabilities is as important as your own abilities. He looked directly at the crowd. How many of you have studied human combat methods? No one raised their hand. How many of you have researched why Earth is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld? Again, silence. Perhaps, Valanth said, it is time you learned what it means to come from a world where everything is trying to kill you. Shelter, still flexing his recovering arm, spoke up. Instructor with respect, I have trained since childhood. My family has produced warriors for generations. How could I be defeated so easily by someone who appears so ordinary? Valanth's expression was unreadable. That, Cadet Shelter, is exactly the right question, and I believe the answer will surprise all of you. Instructor Valanth gestured for the cadets to gather around the arena floor. What had started as a simple demonstration had become an impromptu lesson that would change how everyone at the academy viewed humans. Computer, display Earth classification data, Valanth commanded. A holographic screen appeared above the arena, showing a blue and green planet rotating slowly. Data scrolled alongside the image: atmospheric composition, gravity readings, temperature ranges. and hundreds of other measurements. Earth is classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, Valenth began. Most of you come from Class 1 or Class 2 worlds, safe, stable environments with few natural threats. Some of you are from Class 3 or Class 4 worlds with moderate challenges. None of you understand what Class 12 means. Sarah stood quietly beside Shelter, watching her classmates' faces as they studied the data. She had seen these numbers before, but viewing them through alien eyes was different. Earth's gravity is 1.3 times galactic standard, Valenth continued. This means that every step Sarah takes, every movement she makes, is against resistance that would exhaust most of you within minutes. Her bones are 3 times denser than yours, Shelter. Her muscles are packed with fibers that can generate force you cannot match, despite her smaller size. A Krathuri cadet named Gorthik raised his hand. But instructor, if humans are so physically powerful, why do they appear so small and weak? Excellent question. Computer, display human evolutionary history. The hologram changed to show Earth's timeline, with images of various creatures that had lived on the planet over millions of years. Humans evolved on a world that has experienced 5 mass extinctions. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun. Diseases that killed most living things. Predators that hunted in packs with intelligence nearly equal to human levels. Sarah watched her classmates' expressions change as they absorbed this information. But more importantly, Valenth continued, humans spent their entire evolutionary history fighting each other. While most species developed in isolated areas with similar opponents, humans spread across their entire planet. They fought in frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, and mountain ranges. They learned to adapt to any environment and defeat any enemy. Shelter, who had been silent since the fight, finally spoke up. Are you saying that humans are naturally better warriors than we are? Not better. Different. Valenth changed the hologram to show combat footage from various species. Vextai fighting techniques are excellent for battling other Vextai or creatures with similar anatomy. Krathuri methods work well against opponents who rely on strength and armor. But humans develop techniques to fight anything. The hologram showed human martial arts from Earth, karate, jiu-jitsu, boxing, wrestling, and dozens of other fighting styles. Every human fighting technique is based on one principle: using your opponent's strengths against them. They learned this because they had to. On Earth, humans were not the strongest, fastest, or most dangerous creatures. They survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more determined. A Zephyrian cadet named Nelvian raised his hand. But surely their techniques cannot work against all species? Sarah answered this time. Human martial arts teach us to study our opponents. We learn anatomy, physics, and psychology. We practice against different body types, fighting styles, and mental approaches. The goal is not to be stronger than our enemy, but to understand them better than they understand us. Show them, Valenth commanded. Sarah nodded and turned to address the gathered cadets. Shelter fought the way he was trained to fight, using his natural advantages. But he made several mistakes based on assumptions about human capabilities. She gestured to the space where they had fought. First, he assumed that because I appeared small and weak, I would be slow and clumsy. But human evolution favored speed and agility over size. We had to be fast to escape predators and catch prey. Shelter nodded slowly. You move faster than I expected. Second, he used techniques designed to fight other Vextai. But I am not Vextai. His reach advantage meant nothing because I know how to fight inside an opponent's guard. How do you know that? Asked a Krathuri. Because on Earth, humans regularly fought creatures much larger than themselves. We developed close-quarters techniques specifically for battling bigger, stronger opponents. Valenth added, Computer. Show Earth predator data. The hologram displayed images of Earth's most dangerous animals: tigers, bears, crocodiles, sharks, and others. Humans learned to kill creatures that could tear them apart with single blows. They did this not with claws or natural armor, but with intelligence, tools, and techniques passed down through thousands of generations of warfare. The alien cadets stared at the images with obvious discomfort. Many of Earth's predators looked more dangerous than anything on their home worlds. But the most important factor, Valant continued, is that humans never developed a single unified fighting style. Every region of Earth created different techniques based on their local threats and environmental challenges. Sarah nodded. I have studied 17 different martial arts. Each one teaches different approaches to combat. Some focus on striking, others on grappling. Some use an opponent's force against them. Others rely on precise timing and placement. Shelter looked confused. Why learn so many different styles? Would it not be better to master one? Because every opponent is different, Sarah explained. What works against a Vextai might not work against a Krathari. What defeats a strong enemy might fail against a fast one. Humans learned to be adaptable because our survival depended on it. One of the Zephyrian cadets spoke up. This explains the combat techniques, but what about the psychological aspect? Shelter is known for his mental toughness, yet he seemed unsettled by the fight. Valant's phoneless 4 eyes focused on the questioner. Another excellent observation. Humans develop psychological warfare along with their physical techniques. On Earth, defeating an enemy's mind was often more important than defeating their body. Sarah added, I studied Shelter's behavior for 3 weeks. I learned his patterns, his assumptions, his emotional responses. When he underestimated me, I used that against him. You planned this? Shelter asked, sounding impressed rather than angry. I prepared for it. On Earth, we have a saying, know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. The crowd of cadets had grown even larger during this explanation. Word of what had happened was spreading throughout the academy, and everyone wanted to understand how the small human had defeated one of their best warriors. Instructor Valanth raised his hand for attention. Let me be clear about something. What you witnessed today was not a fluke or an accident. This is what humans are capable of when they apply their natural abilities and training. He looked directly at Sarah. Cadet Chun, how many years have you been training in combat? 15 years, sir. I started when I was 7 years old. And how many different opponents have you trained against? Sarah thought for a moment. Hundreds. My instructors believed that the variety was essential for proper development. Gasps came from the crowd. Most alien cadets had trained primarily against their own species, with perhaps occasional practice against 1 or 2 other types of opponents. Shelter stepped forward. Sarah, I owe you an apology. I judged you based on appearance and assumptions. I treated you as inferior when I should have treated you as a fellow warrior. He extended his hand in a gesture of respect that Sarah recognized from her studies of Vextai culture. She clasped his forearm in the traditional greeting. Your technique was flawless, Shelter continued. You defeated me completely, but you did not humiliate me unnecessarily. You could have hurt me badly, but you chose not to. That shows true warrior's honor. Sarah smiled. On Earth, we believe that a true warrior's strength is measured not by how much damage they can inflict, but by how much restraint they can show. Over the following weeks, everything changed for Sarah at the academy. Her classmates began asking her about human training methods, combat techniques, and Earth's history. She was no longer the strange little alien who did not belong. She was a valuable source of knowledge and a respected opponent. Shelter became her closest friend and training partner. He was eager to learn human techniques and teach Sarah about Vextai methods in return. Their sparring matches drew crowds of spectators. who wanted to study the combination of alien strength and human adaptability. Other species began requesting training sessions with Sarah. The Krathari wanted to learn how to fight smaller, faster opponents. The Zephyrians were fascinated by the psychological aspects of human combat doctrine. Even the instructors started incorporating human techniques into their lesson plans. But the most important change was in how everyone viewed humans in general. Word spread beyond the Academy about the Deathworld species that had joined the galactic community. Military analysts began studying Earth's history and realizing what a valuable addition humans could be to galactic defense forces. Sarah had not just proven herself. She had proven her entire species. When the next class of cadets arrived at the Academy 6 months later, it included 12 more humans. They were no longer curiosities or experiments, but recognized warriors whose unique abilities were desperately needed.